teacher at March Elementary School and the vocal music coordinator K through 12. I'm here this evening to talk about our vocal music curriculum and to give an update along with Mr. Rich Ressler, the instrumental music coordinator K through 12, on all the wonderful things the Easton music programs are doing for our students and throughout the community. I'd first like to start with the curriculum review that the vocal music department has been working on. So at the beginning of the 2018-2019 school year, our general music staff began reviewing our current curriculum and found the following areas of concern. Our materials are outdated. We're currently using the Silver Burdette Music Connection book from 1995. Our books are in poor shape, falling apart, and can no longer be replaced. So we have a shortage in some areas. There's an inability to use some of the materials that come with that textbook because they are VCRs and good old-fashioned overhead projectors with transparencies that we don't have any longer. So even if we do have a transparency, we can't use it. And all of the recordings that come with that textbook are on CD, but we don't have CD drives to play them. So we can't do that. And the resources are also dated and do not allow for any interactive or online features that would appeal to a 21st century learner. And one thing I think is funny is one of the textbooks has a picture of a rotary phone in it. So you can have like a 10-minute conversation about what a rotary phone is because they have no idea. So during the February 2019 in-service training, we spent time searching online and began looking at and reviewing available textbooks and programs. We came up with two possibilities and requested time to meet with the representatives of the company as a vocal music department. We met first with McGraw-Hill on March 25th, and about a week later we met with representatives of the Quaver program. Both companies were gracious enough to give us the ability to pilot their programs in our classes, and at the end of the school year we met again as a department and discussed our experiences and the pros and cons of each textbook, and we overwhelmingly agreed that we would love to have Quaver. Here are just a few reasons why the Quaver K-8 general music program is what we're recommending. We found Quaver to be highly interactive, and the students were engaged in singing the songs in the hallways and in their classrooms. Outside of music, students can come up to the boards and interact with the screens. The songs highlight the words as the music's being played to help students read the lyrics and not get lost. And we can take pre-recorded voices out of the songs once the students are comfortable with singing on their own, and so much more. Quaver is easy to use with all grade level resources located on a teacher dashboard. There are several ways to sort for resources, such as through titles and topics that we might want to cover. We can also customize lessons on this platform and add resources that we are currently using seamlessly into an already existing Quaver lesson. A great feature that Quaver offers is the opportunity for independent practice for our students. Students can simply take their iPads and scan a Quaver-generated QR code, and it will take the students to an activity where they can work on the skill we've been covering in class. For example, if we're working on identifying instrument families during class, students can then go onto their iPad, either in class or at home, and practice identifying instruments through pictures and sounds at their own pace. The materials are high quality, and Quaver adds new materials quarterly at no additional cost. And these materials will be compatible with Clever, which will allow students to have access to those interactive practice materials at home. There is staff training embedded into the program. Quaver offers 12 video training courses, 2 live digital training courses each year in August and January that are between 2 and 3 hours in length, and a 30-minute monthly webinar. Quaver does offer PDE credit certificates for completing these online trainings, and with the purchase of the Quaver program, we will also receive 1 in-person training session for all staff. The concern we had as a department with online resources is, what do you do if the internet goes down? Well, Quaver has that solved by providing us a flash drive that contains all core materials that will allow class to continue just without the interactive features. The total cost for the 8 schools is $55,125 for a 5-year subscription, and each school would have 4 licenses, which means that the instrumental teachers at each school could also use the program for rhythm or note reading materials. Originally on the slide I have 12 teachers, but after I realized the instrumental teachers could be on, that would be 16 teachers would have access for $55,000. The photos on this slide show some of the interactive features in use that the Quaver program offers. The large photo on the left has two students working on note reading as a whole class activity up on the boards. The photo in the upper right shows kindergarten students composing their own 4-beat rhythms using animals after doing the activity together in class. They loved that. It was fun. And the bottom photo shows first grade students practicing the listening skill of dynamics and determining if the sound is loud or soft after working on it in class. This slide, which was graciously put together by Mrs. Liz Perez at Cheston Elementary School, shows Quaver in action, including students interacting with the program and showing some of the printed resources that come along and support the online resources. We thank you all for all you do for the Easton Music Department, and we would appreciate your support in funding this new resource. Thank you so much. We love Quaver and the kids do too. I don't know if there's any questions.
Does anyone have any questions about the program?
It looks wonderful.
So the department started out with obviously with their curriculum review, which they did review all that, made any adjustments that they needed to, K through 8, and I have that binder if anybody wants to see that. And then they also did ask for quotes for 3, 5, and 8 years. And talking with our administrative team, we thought 5 would be the best bet to go with this time.
How did we end up with a 1995 textbooks? Is that part of do we have a regular cycle of reviewing textbooks?
Ultra 6 apparently a 25-year cycle.
We had a curriculum cycle, and then as we were going through the financial hard times, we kind of put everything on hold and really addressed things more or less as they came up.
We happened to be, I don't mean it, we happened to be the year that happened. We were in the process, and then that happened. But we were in the process at that time of looking
Back
at
on track now.
Right, so so we are back on track with the reviews.
We're back on track and creating the new cycle for us to
Okay.
work with our resources.
All right. Excellent. Any other questions or comments? Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome. And then as part of, we were asked to, a couple highlights of what the music department does since we were here tonight. So I'll start with vocal and then I'll pass it on to Mr. Ressler. I just threw a couple things up there. The elementary staff gave me so much more. I only had so much time. So we're really, we're putting our winter and spring, we did our winter concerts, we're working on our spring concerts. All of third grade went to Paxos Elementary School, and the Bach Choir comes in and does a free concert for us. So we do that every year. Our vocal staff, 4 through 12, is busily working on All City Chorus Concert, which is coming up in March 13th, which is March in Our Schools Month, so that's why we do it then. Cheston and Paxonosa, so proud of them. They were able to get a teacher's grant, so now they all have Cheston and Paxonosa has a classroom set of ukuleles, which is great. March Elementary School, we did a fundraising event to see the Christmas Spectacular in New York City. It's something the families at March have come to. This is our third trip to New York City. It's become something the families are looking forward to. I've already had people asking, where am I going next year? And in an effort to involve students in some community support, we ran a food drive as part of our concert last year. We piloted out with Family Connections, Backpack Pals, and Little March was able to get 185 food items, which I thought was really great for our community. Forks is out and about performing in the community, Barnes and Nobles, tree lighting ceremonies. I think something that's great that's going on there is their kindergarten through third grade performs dramatizations of books that have to do with the 7 habits, so I think that's fabulous. And Shawnee Music classrooms are busy using Orff, Kodai, and Solfege to cover all their music topics there until we get clearer. Middle school, they're always out and about. They're again doing their concerts. Did the pep rally. They sang the national anthem and the alma mater. The chorale, which is their audition group, goes out and performs more often, so you can see all the places there that they perform. And something coming up for them that's special is they're going to participate in the Bach at Noon concert on February 11th and work with the Bach choir. So there's a carry through there, so that's really nice. And the high school, I apologize for it being small, but there's a lot of things on the high school slide there. I tried to fit as many as I could. To highlight a few things, we have students that are participating in the PMEA District 10 chorus. That involves Berks County, Lehigh County, Northampton County. So we had some students that auditioned and made that group. We had 10 in Northampton County chorus. Men performed with the Rowan University Young Men's Choir. The jazz chorale's out performing. You can read them all. They're just out about always doing things for our community and bringing pride to Easton. I'll turn it over to Mr. Ressler.
My name is Richard Ressler. I teach instrumental music at Palmer Elementary, and for the past 4 years, I've been the instrumental music co-curricular with the vocal side. I don't have pretty slides for you. I do have some numbers for you, though. Currently, grades 4 through 12, those are the grades you can perform on an instrument in our district. We have nearly 25% of our student population enrolled in those programs. That's 1,397, almost 1,400 of close to 7,000 students are enrolled in our music program instrumentally, both band and orchestra through those grades. The high school level this past fall alone, they performed in Florida, as we well know. They took 320 students down to Orlando, performed in the Gator Bowl, and the orchestra performed at Universal Studios. Many of us don't know that while they were also there, their students conducted a service project for a youth crisis center while they were there, collecting donations prior to their leaving, and took them down and delivered and worked with those people down there. In October, the high school jazz band hosted a jazz band from Flensburg, Germany. We've been doing this for many years now, an exchange program back and forth. It was our year to host this year, so they came, stayed with host families, traveled the area, saw some of our great sites, including downtown Easton, Martin Guitars in Nazareth, and Philadelphia they went to. They also performed a concert here. Easton High School hosting Northampton County Band, bringing students together from all the schools within the Northampton County District into one large band. They had their first rehearsal last week. My son's participating in it from Nazareth, so I got to sit in and watch that, and it was great. With PMEA, the honors ensembles, Easton sending 14 students between jazz, concert band, and orchestra. 20 pep band performances, jazz band performances, all the football games. They performed in 3 marching band festivals, that one of which they hosted, several parades. They also had 6 evening concerts so far in the winter season. Hosting guest performer from Penn State, professor of cello. The middle school performed their marching band at First Flag, Saucon Valley Spirit Parade, Easton Halloween Parade. They performed at the Leader and Me Assembly over at Shawnee Elementary, right across the way from them. Their jazz band performed, many of you hopefully saw it, at the PSBA conference in Hershey this past fall. So they were down there. Peace Candle Lighting, Palmer Mall, they have performance over the holiday season, and their winter concert, just to touch on a few. Middle school, they sent small ensembles to the airport over the holiday season to perform. They also sent 2 students to the Pennsylvania Music Education Association honors group for elementary students. That concert was at the beginning of January, right after return. At the elementary level, We began 300 students in the 4th grade this year. That's roughly 50% of our student population in 4th grade. Between 4th and 5th grade, we have 550 students enrolled in the program. They just began preparing for their spring concert where those 550 students will perform over 2 nights at our middle school. You'll all receive an invitation to one of those concerts. Please attend. Coming up this week at Shawnee Elementary, they have their beginner premiere performance where all the beginners get their first chance to perform in front of their parents. That's this Thursday. 7th, see, Sherry, I gotta write it down, 7:30. Just all told, the instrumental program over this past fall season up to date has performed over 80 times. In the upcoming spring season, there's probably gonna be close to another 40 performances. We do have a complete concert schedule that was sent out earlier this year, and I mean, you can see how full it is, especially when we get to May. If you try to get into the auditorium at the middle school in May, forget it, we got it booked up, I know I do. So, I would like to thank you, Mr. Keegan, is it? When you asked that question about curriculum revision and what happened, as we said, I believe it was 2005 was the last time we actually went through the cycle. It doesn't affect just the vocal music with their materials, but it affects us. That's where we get money for instruments. Since the last revision, we removed 3rd grade ensembles from our groups during that period. And we returned 5th grade to the school. So one of the problems we're currently facing is we purchased a ton of instruments for little kids that we don't have anymore, and it's now inventory we can't use. So as we go through the curriculum revision process, one of the things for instrumental at least, we look to buy new inventory. So we have instruments to suit these 1,400 students within our districts. Thank you for all you do. Thank you for your time. Thank you for paying attention. And we hope to see all of you at one of our concerts in the upcoming season.
Silly question about
Yes, sir.
the instruments that are
Yeah.
too small. Can we
Yeah.
trade them in?
We can't trade them in. Most places won't trade in. I have been charged with trying to gather our inventory that might not be feasible for us and to see if there is a route to either sell it or use it in some other ways that we could possibly benefit. Currently, my problem, I'm at Palmer Elementary, we're now at the middle school, trying to find a location to house all of the unused inventory has been a bit of a challenge that I'm still trying to overcome. Once I can get everything in one location, I can then look at it, sort of between unusable, outdated instruments, usable for someone instruments, and try to go through. There are several places that I can look for possibility of repurposing it, selling it to them, and recouping the proceeds for us to hopefully use for something new. So that is being researched. I am looking at currently purging our inventory of those materials that we can't use.
Is 4th grade the sort of standard age at which a school
Yeah.
district would offer lessons?
Most
Yeah.
districts, and for us, it really has to do with size and comprehension level.
Yeah.
Music is slightly higher till, Mr. Snyder, I've had both of his children, in fact, I believe I saw them at their lessons the other night. When you have certain kids come to you, they might just be too small in 3rd grade. I always get approached by that. Well, I really want to teach my kid in kindergarten. I'm like, you really want to hold your kid off because they're not going to have success.
Right.
They're physically not big enough. They're not mature enough, with their systems and their organs. Wind instruments need lung support, and if you're too little, you can't.
Right.
And we all see pictures of the kids playing the violins and stuff like that, and that's a very specific type of instruction we don't do here, we can't do here because we don't have the time and resources to do it. The Suzuki method of strings, but 4th grade, if you look across the board, is traditionally that level where we find the comprehension, the size, everything kind of is at that perfect level to get them started.
And the willingness to practice.
Right.
And that really helps too.
It sounds like our numbers of participation are terrific, which is
Spectacular.
great. Do you feel like we are doing enough to provide opportunities for every student who wants to give it a try to be able to do that?
We do. We don't turn any student away if we can. I mean, obviously, when we get into inventory and needs, instruments cost money.
Right.
We try to suit as many kids as we can, and if we don't, we all at the elementary level, when we have our signups at the beginning of the year, if they are specifically requesting, I don't have the financial resources, what can you provide me? We make sure they get a choice.
Okay.
It might not be their first choice instrument,
Right.
but we all, basically, if you're asking for an instrument from me, borrow from the school, then give me a list of choices.
Yeah.
Give me your 3, and if I can give you your first choice, I absolutely will. We do not turn any student away. We always try to give them an option.
Excellent, thank you. Thank you
welcome.
both so much for all the information and coming out tonight.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Right,
And
okay. Moving right along, we have our mid-year data update. Mr. Tuck is going to take us through some of the highlights.
yes, I am. Thank you.
Sure.
So what I provided you with is PDF versions of the summary reports for both the universal screener, which is entitled Achievement, and the second one, which is entitled Growth. What I have here is a summary of that data for discussion purposes. For those of you new to the board, STAR reading and STAR mathematics are computer adaptive assessments that we use in our district as a universal screener for students in reading for grades 2 through 8, and for mathematics in grades 1 through 8. We also use the DIBELS as our screener in grades K1 and now 2 as well. So we have two things going on there in grade 2. But the first thing in terms of at or above benchmark is this is our measurement to determine whether students are in need of additional support or intervention. The standard is the 40th percentile in this particular assessment at the grade level. Any student who falls below the 40th percentile, we review that student very closely, determine more need or determine a need for that particular student and provide an intervention. And that system functions K to 8. We then also use the STAR assessments to measure growth. So what the STAR is able to do for us is give us a student growth percentile. What that means is that every student in that particular grade level that starts at a certain point in the year is then measured against their peers throughout the year, and it's a real true measurement of growth. You're not comparing apples to oranges here, you're comparing oranges to oranges. Karen and I start the school year off at a 438 skilled score. We're looking for that increase in skilled score between September and January, where that is then ranked with millions of other students across the nation who are taking that at the same grade level. And then there's a percentile that's attached to that. So 35th percentile is our measurement for growth. That means that student is performing better than 35% of the students that started at that same point at the beginning of the school year. So we find it to be extremely important, not just to say whether or not students are at or above benchmark or proficient on the exam, but it's more importantly is that students are showing growth. And we do that at two intervals. You could actually consider it 3. September to January is what I've reported out here. We can also go January to May, or we can do September to the end of the school year and be able to determine that growth target. So as you see at the at or above benchmark in terms of the screening data, it's really important for us also to look at increases. So we want to make sure that throughout the year, the number of students who are at or above benchmark is increasing. The caveat to that is that the standard goes up. Right, so what the expectation to meet the 40th percentile in September is lower than what it is in January and lower than what it will be in May. So keeping pace with that is important, but then excelling really says something else about that. So looking at this data set, I always refer to this as the what. So this is kind of what happened. What's probably most important is the discussions about why. So when we look at data and we say in 6th grade, we didn't see an increase in the number of students at our benchmark, what's more important is that in 6th grade, we start to ask those questions why. So we ask those questions at the grade level, and then we ask those questions down to the individual teacher, group, or class, and then we look down to the individual student. So the last professional development day, the middle school, for example, spent time reviewing their STAR data at mid-year and looking at their individual classes and making some determinations on what support would be there. The elementary school has a more rigorous cycle of looking at that data set, placing students in interventions, and also using it to progress monitor throughout the course of the school year. The next slide then includes the growth targets, which I mentioned before. What you can see here is that the reading percentages are always a little bit higher or lower than the math percentages, as well as at or above benchmark. What tends to happen for students in mathematics is their grade level content tends to increase as they go throughout the year. Where as you progress in school in reading, your comprehension comes out and it's more skill-based, right? So those are where sometimes you start to see a gap. What's important to note is that percentages of students meeting that growth target doesn't necessarily dip too much, with the exception as listed here, which is in 6th grade. So those questions then will be why, right? So why are those things happening, getting down not only to the grade level, but to the teacher and then down to the student to make those determinations, and that's what's taking place right now in our schools and in our classrooms. Any questions regarding any of the data? Yes, Dr. Keegan.
Why do you think it happens?
Well, there's a lot of things that occur in 6th grade in particular. It's a transition year, right? So students are leaving our elementary building, they're going into our 6th grade setting. There's a lot of things that are associated with that. There's also a lot of pedagogical changes, but also maturity changes in terms of what's expected of those students leaving the elementary building to the middle school, and then just the fact that they're middle school students. And those sort of things that they're going through in their lives, maturity-wise, that has some of that impact. There are other factors too in terms of, the number of teachers they see in a day and some of those other issues, that are compounded with that transition from elementary to middle school.
It seems to me as though, and this is, it's interesting because middle school, I think if you look at everybody's data, you're gonna see the same thing, 5th to 6th grade, wherever it is. The learning to read versus reading to learn issues and all that can be ironed out. But it seems to me as though when we stop making reading a formal class, okay, we kind of leave it up to the other subject teachers to, keep students going on, reading informational text, because it seems like the standards, when you said they go up, they really go up because you're now starting to read more technical materials and so forth. It's almost a team effort to try to get students to continue to read and progress in other classes, because that's where it has to happen, right? It has to happen in history. You have your language arts class, they can't do it all. But, history is, another place where you could really start to look at, increasing comprehension and those types of things. This is not atypical data, obviously. This is
What
pretty
is the amount
standard.
of time now that 6th grade has for language arts this year?
They have 84 minutes or 82 minutes.
Every day,
41 and
right?
41. They have 82 minutes per day, that's correct.
Which is an increase, right, from what we had, where we had two separate classes. It wasn't,
6th grade, we had language arts and reading. 2 years ago, we combined them into a double block, so they're receiving both of those in that double block of time.
right, which is still less instruction than they were receiving in 5th grade every day, correct? By,
Correct. It's 30, almost 30 minutes.
yeah, 30 minutes a day.
So as Dr. Keegan mentioned, that is the challenge, right? The challenge is to allow for students to get additional reading time, right, in an area like social studies, because that time is doubled once they reach 6th grade. Right? So they're receiving science and social studies every other day, so to speak, for a 38-minute block, Tracy, or 40-minute block in 5th grade, and now they're receiving it every day for 41 minutes in 6th grade. So there is a reliance there for that sort of thing to occur. Plus, it's a natural fit because that's the type of text that they should be exposed to. The type of reading that they should be doing is more content rich, right? So they should be reading like a historian. They should be reading like a scientist. And those are the best areas for that to occur. But there is that gap, right? And there is that transition that is occurring within the school. And that has been a topic of conversation. The question to nail down is, how are we making sure that we're setting up some actions, right, to produce that change that that we want to see, particularly in this grade level. So that is exactly the conversation that we've been having at that level, and will continue to have at that level in making some of those adjustments.
Right, especially when you start looking at those subject areas, providing, PD for staff to know how to teach. It's one thing to know your content and to be able to teach someone the content, but to be able to teach someone how to handle an informational text in history or science, what they should be looking for and how they're working with it. That's not an area that you are necessarily coming out of a college of ed program
correct.
knowing.
It's interesting you bring it up because it comes down to, somebody always says it in a middle school meeting, and that is, everybody's gotta be a reading teacher, right? But not everybody can be a reading teacher, right? That's a skill that you have to have. I mean, you have to get a little bit of training to help that out, but any kind of, I won't belabor this point, but any kind of progressive test that you take these days, as you do well on the reading, you go up, and there's, next thing you know, it's science, right? Science bogs you down with vocabulary. It's really intense, vocabulary rich things, and it's tough to teach vocabulary without the reading, and obviously the reading without vocabulary. So it's not an easy thing to change these scores for sure.
And one of our other challenges at the secondary level, if you can use the term for 6th grade and 7th grade, is the varied levels, right, that occur. So as students progress through the system, some accelerate, right, some stay at grade level, some start to fall below. And so leveling, like level text, and being able to differentiate then becomes a big challenge. And that's something that, you know, we're looking to support our teachers in doing, because it's not taught, right? It's not something that you typically would learn to say, look, this is on grade level, but we have groups of students below, we have groups of students above, and that's one of the things the STAR assessment has done for us, if anything, is really given us a look to say, in terms of growth, what are we doing for students that are excelling? What are we doing for students who are not just students who are struggling? And that has been a challenge, right? So if students are going to move above the 96th percentile in grades 6 and 7, they're really reading some intense things. And I've been in classrooms, I evaluate a couple of 6th grade teachers. The one day, they were reading, you know, it wasn't even the size of the text, but it was the nature of the text. Black Hawk Down, right? I mean, you're familiar with the movie, but the novel, right, is something, you know, it's going to take some sit-down time, right? It's going to take a lot of, you know, maneuvering for a 6th grader. Yet that was the type of book that was at this table that I was sitting at in terms of independent reading. So that just gives you the nuances, right? I think that, you know, most of us can gather. The idea is, this is the what, and we spend a lot of time even right now talking about the why. We're going to continue to do so as we progress throughout the year.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from board members on that? Thank you, Mr. Cook. And while I have you here, are you going to talk about the comprehensive plan? Or? Okay.
Sure. No slides for this one. So we will begin our next 3-year comprehensive planning process. Our plan is due November 30th of 2020. It's due to start in July of 2021. So we're just in the initial phases right now of going through that process. The state of Pennsylvania has created a new platform. They do that quite often. And so you get trained on one platform, you get used to it, and they go out to bid for another platform. So I actually was in Malvern, Pennsylvania this morning, learning all about the new platform so that we could come back and work within that document. The steering committee, as listed there, is a group of diverse stakeholders that will work together to steer this committee, not to complete the document. So we've had lots of discussions at the cabinet level about how to make sure that we're including other stakeholder feedback through this process. So it is not only the members of the steering committee that will be providing input and feedback, but it will be lots of our stakeholders as we progress over the next 3 to 5 months. Any questions? I will make sure that the board is apprised of all of our progress, you know, as we go through the process. We want to just make sure that the steering committee was solidified this month in advance of our starting this process.
Thank you. Any questions so far? Okay. All right, so the next item on our agenda is the proposed school calendar for the 2020-2021 school year. Really, do you want to introduce that for us? And board members to get a printed copy as well today.
Sure. This calendar is quite similar to our current year's calendar. Labor Day is a little later in the year, or in September next year, so our start date is not scheduled until August 31st. But essentially, the in-service days are in line with what we currently have this year, one in November and one in February. Those also meet our needs from the perspective of timing. Unique thing about election day this year is obviously we are in a presidential election, and so we expect a very high voter turnout. 3 of our buildings are polling locations, so we do have this set as an in-service day, but we also, in conversation with the committee here, Dr. Keegan has suggested, and Tracy and I certainly agree, that we will not hold any of our in-service activities at those polling locations. So at Forks, Cheston, and Tracy, we'll not only not have students there, but we'll make sure that our staff are in other locations for their PD that day, because that frees up our parking lots for all of the citizens that are coming to vote. Parent-teacher conferences are still scheduled in December. We had received some feedback from teachers that they had wanted the parent-teacher conferences a little earlier in the year. So on January 27th, when we had an Act 80 day, Tracy conducted a poll, and Ann McIntyre conducted a poll of our teachers, elementary, had a really good response rate, and 72% of them are in favor of keeping them where they are in December. So we are proposing to maintain that current structure. And then essentially the rest of the calendar is very similar to this year, except we did eliminate one of the Act 80 days, which are the half days where we plan in-service activities for our staff. We eliminated one of those, just essentially the proximity to the February in-service made it a little duplicative to plan professional development twice within 2 weeks. So we will only have 3 proposed for next year's calendar.
Thank you, Mrs. Amelia. As I've expressed before, I remain concerned about the number of overall half days in this calendar for our elementary school students. I don't want to, I think the Act 80 days are important in terms of the professional development that we provide. I don't want to give that impression, but I think we need to take a look at the number. Our number is out of line compared to other districts, particularly compared to other urban districts who don't have those half days. And you know, on a related note, I hope that we can work with our teaching staff to try to come up with a structure for our conferences that would ideally reduce the number of half days and also increase opportunities for conferences at other times of day. And I know that it is a negotiations issue, and I hope that we are able to work with EAEA to try to come up with some solutions for that as soon as we reasonably can. Anybody else have any comments or questions on the calendar for next year?
If we don't have any snow days, it's gonna be a nice long summer, right, with that late start date?
Yeah, absolutely.
Nice.
And we aren't going to
But
have.
we're holding out hope. I don't know, there's a winter weather advisory for tomorrow
Right.
night.
Right, yeah, but I would
Don't,
use
you know. You're not writing this winter off yet. Okay, next up, the elementary school boundaries. This is Amelia or Piazza and
So we've been taking a look at our boundaries for our elementary buildings, just to give some history of how they came to be what they currently are. In 2013-14, we had charged the Pennsylvania Economy League to come in and do an enrollment study. And they completed that in November of 2014, and we really used that as the basis to lead our discussions and ultimately get to the place of doing a redistricting in for the start of the 2016-17 school year. It led to boundary changes, but also through the data that we had received from the Pennsylvania Economy League, we were also looking at our philosophical beliefs of 5th grade being at the middle school versus the elementary school. So at that time, we knew that we had excess space in our elementary buildings. And so we made the decision to return 5th grade to the elementary schools, and that's a decision that I think we all philosophically believed in and continue to believe in. That's something that we feel strongly about. But as we've gone forward, we recognize that the enrollment that was reviewed in 2013, predicted in current year, and then also predicted at the conclusion of the 2023 year that the Pennsylvania Economy League looked at was pretty inaccurate, to say the least. So we were looking at this year being predicted at 8,047 students when in fact we had 8,712. There was the prediction that we would decline in enrollment by 1,000 students over that decade. There is no indication that that is going to stay true over the course of the next 3 years. So while we made a lot of those decisions, and a lot of them were done based on our philosophical beliefs, we also made decisions about some elementary boundary lines that we have had to kind of take a look at and revisit now that we're where we are in an enrollment in our elementary buildings. So as we started to talk about this, our goals were to address, we have current residential growth taking place in Palmer Township. That is currently happening, and we are receiving students as a result of that. Predominantly, that growth is taking place within the Tracy Elementary boundaries. We also know that we're opening Cheston Elementary School in August, and we have a significantly increased capacity over what our current building at Cheston has. So that's something that we knew and we planned for as we went through the design of that building. But as we're approaching the opening, we know that we have that increased capacity at our disposal. So in our conversations, we've really talked about neighborhood schools and being able to, from an accessibility standpoint, making our schools as accessible as possible to our families, and looking at what makes best sense from a neighborhood perspective. So currently our boundary for Tracy Elementary School does include some students who live in proximity to Paxenosa Elementary School. So what you'll see is in the red, that section of that area currently is bused to Tracy Elementary School, although you can see the proximity of those students to Paxenosa Elementary School. So we looked at that, and we broke that down and looked at the number of students that we have within Tracy Elementary that live within that red boundary section. It's a total of 68 students, and you can see the breakdown by grade level. So we've looked at the enrollment at Tracy. We know that that's a place where we have that residential growth, and we're receiving students that are moving into those homes. So we've taken a look at that section and said that could help alleviate the growth that we're experiencing there, but also have the students be in a more neighborhood school. Also, we have the boundary, what's in red is students that are attending Palmer Elementary, but the blue box is Cheston Elementary School. So you'll see that those students are in close proximity to Cheston, yet they're being bused to, right now, the middle school, but they're being bused to be part of Palmer Elementary School. As we're looking at this, we know the increased capacity that we're going to have with the new building, and then just from a proximity standpoint, they would be in a neighborhood school. And the breakdown of students that are in that section is 56 total students, and you see the breakdown by grade level.
Are these current?
So these are current, so I only have grades K through 4 because 5th grade will obviously be going to the middle school next year in grade 6. So these are current K, which will become 1 next year. We obviously we don't know our numbers for incoming kindergarten students next year, but I can say that live birth data shows that there's actually been a decline in live births, and we should anticipate a little bit of a decrease. Not 1,000 students of a decrease, but a little bit of a decrease in the coming years. And also, we have students who are attending Forks Elementary School who are in that red box, and the blue box there is Cheston. So we took a look at, if the new Cheston Elementary would be able to accommodate all of those students, and it will be able to accommodate all of those students. We've also discussed the growth that's taking place in what's now the Black Diamond area across the street from Cheston, and at factoring all of the units there, if there were to be 2.5 students per unit, which is what you can use as a projection, we would be well within able to bring those students in as well with the with these change in boundary lines. So we would still have the capacity to do that. So at Forks, the Forks students that are currently being bused from the Highlands area to Forks Elementary, there are 43 students total, and you can see the breakdown. So as we reviewed all of this, we really, we are coming to the recommendation that we amend the boundary lines. Total in all, as of the date of this presentation, there would be 124 students across those areas that would be impacted, but it does allow us to alleviate the space at Tracy Elementary that we know that we need. It utilizes the increased capacity that we have in our New Cheston Elementary School, and it achieves the goal of having all of our student population then across our 7 elementary schools in a neighborhood school to increase accessibility to our families. So in looking at all of this, obviously nothing's finalized at this point in the year with staffing. There would potentially be a few changes that would need to be made, but again, not many when we've dug down into the numbers. And that's not unique to this situation. That's something that we have to look at every single year. It's just looking at enrollment across grade levels, across elementary schools, and seeing if we have to shift staffing as a result of any enrollment trends that we're seeing. So there potentially would be a little bit of that, but really nothing significant when you look at the movement. So we are recommending that we amend the elementary boundary lines as presented here this evening. We would update then our elementary boundary lines document so that it's prepared in ample enough time for kindergarten registration, so that as families in March are going to register their students for kindergarten, they're doing so at the school that we in fact will have them attending next year.
I have a question about busing.
Sure.
You will be busing children that are far enough away from
Oh
the
yes.
school.
Oh yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Philosophically, I think this is really important to do. I've been sorry to see some kids have to travel so far when there's, a school in their neighborhood. I do just want to make sure we recognize that for those 124 children who will have to change schools, that, we understand that is difficult to do. And I know that there are some of those kids who were redistricted last time too. And so for some of these kids, they're not going to have the experience that we would have wanted of a sort of, continuous K-5 experience in one building. And it's not something that we do just because, but this really is important. I think that, all of these kids who are, moving to Paxinosa and Cheston, these are, wonderful buildings that are, at the highest standard. Obviously, Cheston's going to be a brand new school, which would be, great for all of them. But I do just want to make sure we recognize, how difficult it will be for some of those students. And I hope that we will provide opportunities, as we did last time, for students to be able to travel to their new school this year and get to see the building. Well, we won't be able to for Cheston per se, but for everyone else that we have, the opportunity for them.
When would the parents be notified?
If we were to vote on this in February, we would notify them that very week. Yes.
I think timing's everything.
Yeah.
And right now, when you've got Chester coming on board, he really gives you an opportunity to be able to get back to that neighborhood
Right.
concept.
Right.
So I think that's, if you go back to the third slide, Melissa, anyone have any concerns about how far off this is?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
I mean, and is this the only way that you do your projected enrollments through this lead?
That was how we did it in that time.
Okay.
We also use data that we have across the IU
Right.
and the live birth data, and we're able to make projections that way. But this was a comprehensive study that was done in that year to look at our facility usage, our aging facilities, and our enrollment, so that we could make decisions. And yeah, that's very concerning.
That was a 10-year projection?
Yep.
Who would even deal with a 10-year projection, to be honest with you? You know, even 5-year projections are gonna be off, on occasions. As long as there's some other way that we recognize that this isn't what we live and die with.
No.
Okay?
No.
That's
So
way off.
we cast that aside and don't
Okay.
use that at all anymore. I
Okay.
just think it's important from a historical perspective that this is what we use to make some of those decisions.
Okay.
And it's brought us back to this place. But really, the only place that we're seeing significant changes is the residential growth in Tracy.
Mhm.
The others are a result of, as we've increased the capacity of the building itself, now we're able to accommodate those students. So,
I also think, Easton is an up and coming community. There are a lot of people who are moving here, and a lot of families I see moving onto College Hill and into downtown, and even though the live birth data isn't necessarily going to give you.
no, it's not, and that's why we don't rely solely on it.
Right.
But no, it's a really good point. You think about where we were from an economic standpoint in 2013, and we're just, coming out of the recession. There wasn't a lot of residential housing on the horizon. All that had kind of been put on pause when we were in the recession. So now we're at a place where it's up again, and now we have to respond.
Right.
So.
I would just like to commend Alyssa and Tracy on their work here. Alyssa was way out ahead of this, alerted me to the need to take a look at this. She and Tracy looked long and hard, collected the information. As we said, we believe in neighborhood schools. I've certainly heard from members of the community that some of our kids don't have access to their neighborhood schools, and their parents potentially don't drive. And so I think in addition to balancing the numbers, we're really getting back to, what we philosophically believe is the right thing to do. So kudos to Alyssa for being on top of this. She did a great job presenting. Thank you, Tracy. Thank you for all your help.
Thank you.
Yeah, I bet those 56 kids who are home or going to Chester are going to be happy to get a new school.
Any other questions or comments from board members?
I just have a question. Does any of the schools have before and after care that then they won't get when they change schools?
No, there is availability at each of the schools. Cheston is not at the school per se, but is through the High Valley Child Care Centers who run our other one, and they are at the Spring Garden, used to be Spring Garden Daycare down off of Burke, I think it is. Yeah, I think it's that side. So the kids that would typically be in the school setting, similar to what they were at Forks per se, would be just housed at different sites. But everyone else has the opportunity for on-site.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, everyone. Are there any comments from members of the public on any of the items that we discussed as part of the academic committee tonight? All right, seeing none, we will have at our voting meeting to approve the K-8 music curriculum. We don't need to approve the comprehensive plan committee, or do we? Don't know.
I think you do. Yeah.
Okay, so we will be voting on the committee, we will be voting on the calendar, and we will be voting on the elementary school boundaries as well. Thank you very much to everyone. That concludes our meeting, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Iago. We'll move to budget and finance, Mrs. Hess.
Thank you. So I will be handing it over to Anetta for our first look at the 2020-21 district budget.
Thank you, Mrs. Hess. So my lead-in to the first look budget is we have a lot of work to do. Our budget, our expenses are increased, obviously, to an amount that we need to spend the next month of this next month working with administration, meetings, staffing, every aspect of the budget, and see where we can redirect and or reduce. These are preliminary numbers. It's only February, but we wanted to get out in front of this and let you know where we currently stand. So the budget right now is up just under 8%, $12.8 million increase. Now, we're very confident that that is a cap on our expenses, and moving forward, and as we're working through this, they will only be reduced. I also want to report that in this budget, in this number, includes 10 to 12 additional staff members. I know that that is a goal of the board every year to increase staff, and we try to do that with every budget and put them in. It also includes appropriate budgeting for the ongoing yearly and annual large increases with IU costs and charter school costs. And as we move forward at the March committee, as we do every year, there'll be more information, more detailed information provided for areas of expenditures. Those that were here before, we talked about the areas that we have leeway with and those that we do not. Also, Mr. Quadrado put something out to the board members. I asked you to forward me or email or anything, call with any type of additional information that you haven't seen in the past that you may want, that will help you understand it more, understand it better, or just general questions. And do that as they come up in your head. That it doesn't matter if it's an email a day. So I can report it and get back to you and do that. And all focus on the budget. On the revenue portion, and as I said earlier in previous meetings, the base index is 2.6%. Our adjusted index is 3.4. So the revenue number, as far as tax purposes, I'm putting out here tonight, is at 3.4. Now, these are the very preliminary numbers on the initial ratables. For those that remember, we get ratables, we get a letter from the county in November, and then we get updated ratables to use for actual numbers in March or early April. So that will essentially reduce that tax burden when those ratables come up, and they always do. What I will do, if we don't have it by the March committee meeting, what I will do is try to put some kind of estimate over the last couple of years, what that difference was when the ratables changed, so we can try to average that out for the March committee. We're going to move the tax collection percentage up from 95% to 96%, and that was based on conversation with the auditor this year. That trend for 2 years running now went up to 96%, and we've been budgeting at 95%. That will change it a little bit. We're going to maintain appropriation from fund balance, the $2 million that we have in this year's budget. And again, in March or before, I will provide the detailed, updated version of our fund balance and where we stand with the assigned, unassigned, committed, and all that. And the current numbers also include a minimal increase in state aid. I just got an email about 5 o'clock tonight from PSBA with the budget message, and I did not have a chance to go on the link to see what the number is proposed to be, so that will be updated as well. So I can cut significantly even before we go into the budget and we cut significant expense. But as usual, I just want to lay out the major items driving this. The salaries, which include the additional staff. It also includes actual salaries, and we do have 2 units up for negotiation this year, so there's an estimate for that. But the salary increase is just under $3 million. The PSERS, the retirement employer's share of the budget. By now, we were supposed to, that is accurate as the enrollment numbers, we were supposed to be on the downward trend of the employer's share. It's going up again another year, and that increase represents more than $1 million. We have the other benefits and contractual obligations. Our charter school, and I want to be clear, it's our budgeted amount. And every year, because we couldn't do it, and we were hoping the revenues would cover for it, but our charter school budget number is going up $3.5 million. That's not to say that the actual expenses from 1920 to 2021 is $3.5 million. It's an increase, but this is going to put us in line with the actual numbers and up-to-date estimates on charter. And that also goes with IU, although IU, we've been increasing in budgeting what we hoped was appropriate every year. But it just seems that all the services and the required services and the tuition and the other replacements, we just can't catch up. And there's a $2.5 million increase for IU for next year. Those numbers alone account for about $10 million of that $12 million increase. So as it stands now, at the 3.4% index for the average assessment, which again has not changed, and not changed since I've been there. But it's an annual increase of $135 on the average assessment. If you go down, I guess I could go 2.4, but if you go down to 2.5%, it's about a $36 difference. And we're going to work downward towards as much as we can, and we'll work with the finance committee and the board certainly towards that. Because again, it's important to note that will automatically be adjusted by the change in ratings. I guess as an estimate for the board, just moving forward, every 0.5% change in the tax rate represents about $500,000 of revenue. And that concludes my very first look at the 2021 budget.
I just want to say I've been kind of following what's going on with the governor, and I feel real good this year that we're going to be seeing some help from the charter school and from the special ed.
Yeah, I saw that in that brief email that I just glanced over. I saw that, a change of money there. I saw the increase in special ed and basic education funding. So look into that, analyze that. I think that it's going to help us. Again, I'm hoping it helps us not, especially in the area of staff. We're not going to cut staff, but we got to work on that number. We want to keep that 10 to 12 units without a doubt.
I have a question on the 10 to 12 staff members. Is that other staff members?
Well, it's the number in there is for professional staff, for teachers. How that pans out the recommendation will come to the board to our February meetings with the directors and the others.
Making sure that we continue to add the appropriate teaching staff as needed. Can be adjusted in terms of the numbers and or which personnel.
So on the, moving forward, we're going to do an update at the committee meeting in March. And I'll ask again, put the information. And then we will continue the dialogue through March. Our goal is to present the preliminary budget at the April committee meeting for a document change from then to the May presentation. The tax burden, where we can make changes and move things around up until the final approval.
Is that it?
What's our total, you said 3.5 million for charter schools, what's our total that we're paying out now?
This current year, we're at about 9.2.
Just over 9.
That's cyber and.
I was gonna ask if you have the breakdown of the difference between the two, because
I
that's
do.
really what they're talking about, forming cyber.
I do. I can also provide the historical increases. I mean, large jumps, especially when we've had the one that came into Easton over the years for the charter. As for this year, yeah, I was looking for a full year.
Last year's
In 18-19, it was like 2.5 for cyber, and over 6.7 for computer network.
I will share with the board that as we continue to have discussions about reorganization, I do think that we want to take into consideration really focusing and concentrating on trying to bring some of those cyber students back to our cyber school. I think that's going to require some attention on our part regarding that cyber school. But certainly by bringing a number of students back, we can save considerable money there, or even justify the staffing that may have to work on it. So that'll be in my plans as I roll out my presentation for the entry plan.
Mr. Department, I can tell you that we have slightly more than doubled the enrollment in the Easton cyber from last year to this year.
It's excellent. Still a small number,
It
but
is,
that's
it
excellent.
is.
Which, by the way, is something that we worked on because we increased the budget for our cyber, but then correspondingly take it down. We need probably some history on that moving forward. We may have to leave it as it is for now or take a chance, but that's good because we did add for the increased enrollment for our cyber.
Yeah, based on my quick assessment, it's something that maybe we haven't paid as much attention to until this year, and we're already seeing great results. And I think by being focused in that area, we can do even more.
Do you know if those numbers are coming from other cyber charter programs or our own students who are switching to an online?
I don't have the number. I don't have the number.
That they stay with us in cyber as opposed to going to another
Correct.
cyber school.
Yeah.
So both of those things are beneficial to us as a district. Okay.
Mike, is that your completion there?
That's it.
Okay. Any board members have any other questions? Okay, anyone from the public on finance agenda items online? Seeing none? Complete.
Thank you, Mrs. Hess. We'll move to buildings and grounds, Dr. Keegan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have, Mrs. Stem is going to speak about the middle school phones.
Actually, I'll speak to it. And this is, Stem is here for any technical questions as well. Last year we had this project for upgrading funds at the middle school, one of our summer projects as part of the infrastructure. With all the projects going on, we kind of put that off. Mrs. Stem did a proposal to upgrade the phones. Our current Cisco communications manager, the version is outdated, and we can't upgrade our phones or fix the current phones there with this version of software. And that includes the call manager, 911, and some other areas. So before we can upgrade that, we have to upgrade our phones. And we went to Integra, our CoStar's vendor, and you see in the attachment, it's about $29,000. That is budgeted. That would be taken out of the technology infrastructure budget. So I would like to ask the board for approval at the February business meeting to move forward with this. And that our staff, our maintenance staff, there's, how many phones are there? So this includes installation by Integra. Typically under different circumstances, because there's so many at an elementary school, our staff can do it. The phones up, doing role plays, all that stuff. So this does include installation.
Any questions?
Is this just on the middle school side? This isn't including the Palmer side?
It includes both, it
I think
includes the
Yeah.
whole complex?
Yeah, the whole complex.
the classroom. Not all.
Next, I see Palmer Elementary update.
Yes,
Colorado.
thank you, Dr. Keegan. So we were hoping to provide a Palmer Elementary update this evening with some news, maybe even we were led to believe that we might have some news this evening, but I'm very disappointed to announce that we do not have anything to update, and our frustrations continue to grow at this point.
Mr. Paprada, at this point, based on your comments, as the board president, I'm going to be making some comments and statements that are reflective of the board's position on where we're at with Palmer. Okay? Since the fall of 2017, the school district has been working to seek project approval to commence the construction of the new Palmer Elementary School. And in fact, in November of 2017, the district was informed that the project would not be approved if the district proposed to continue utilizing a stormwater bubbler previously installed by Palmer Township and already in place on Watson Street, which is the back end street of the Palmer complex. Okay. In order to avoid using the bubbler, the district presented a land development plan which called for a new stormwater pipe to be constructed to connect the stormwater system being installed at Palmer Elementary School property to an outlet under Greenwood Avenue, with the piping to the Adams property being the only viable option. Unfortunately, the revised plan, which proposed to meet those parameters dictated by the township engineer, including a stormwater pipe to the private property, required the school district to negotiate with the property owner to obtain the necessary easement to complete this. In the fall of 2018, the Township Planning Commission gave conditional approval to the submitted plan. At that point, the district administration was attempting to negotiate a fair price to obtain easement on his property. Several negotiation conversations and meetings did occur, and several financial proposals were given to Mr. Adams, all of which were substantially higher than the appraised value, and all of which were subsequently rejected by Mr. and Mrs. Adams. The district and township representatives met on 2 occasions in the fall of 2019 in an attempt to resolve this standstill over the stormwater issue. And a little over 2 weeks ago, the district representatives and engineers met informally to explore additional options to resolve this issue. Although township representatives have expressed their continued desire to support the project, the board is not certain that the township engineer is willing to discuss the data that the district has presented, which differs from the township engineering's position. Our design professionals are uncertain as to the township's engineer's interpretation of the existing township ordinances. Despite numerous attempts and proposals to address the standstill, the district is caught in the middle between the township and the property owner. The district believes that the design of the new school, which increases retention of stormwater on the school property and thereby greatly diminishes the amount of and flow of a flow of water off the property through the use of the bubbler is a valid alternative. The plan is met with continued resistance by the township engineer, and the board believes that unless the township engineer is willing to recognize the vast improvements in the rate of outflow already inherent in the district's design, independent engineers' calculations, this project will continue to be delayed with the distinct possibility the elementary school may have to be relocated. Although the Cheston and Palmer projects' timelines were very similar, as what we discussed in the previous meeting, and both schools were slated to be completed approximately at the same time, the lengthy delay in the Palmer project has delayed the outset of construction, escalated the cost of construction, and has the school district spending large sums of money on legal and engineering costs. Quite frankly, it is difficult for this board to comprehend why two municipal entities cannot work this situation out. This is especially true in light of the fact that the school district not only has incurred design, engineering, and legal costs, which one would expect to be part of a project, but since September 2017, the school district has paid the township of Palmer for the following expenses: engineering fees to the township engineer, $68,015. Attorney fees to the township solicitor, $39,701. And additional engineering fees of $1,050. In essence, the district has paid $108,617 to the township, and the new Palmer Elementary School is nowhere on the horizon. The district has continued to be a collaborative partner in an attempt to resolve this issue and move this project forward, as noted by the township costs that have been paid by the district. Nonetheless, the new Palmer Elementary School is not even close to commencing, maintained far above and beyond to move the project forward. It's now time for the Palmer Township engineer to step up. The school has been there since the 1950s, and the new design greatly diminishes the impact of stormwater from the district property. One has to wonder why this stormwater issue wasn't in the early 70s. One also, the school district and this board have continued to present various options and solutions. Maybe it's time for the township engineer to step forward to discuss realistic proposals and/or share what the cost to solve a decades-old problem. Superintendent Pipperato and I have had several conversations with Supervisor Chairman Holbert, and the three of us are hopeful a compromise can be finalized. The alternative would be a project delayed by years with millions of dollars of additional costs and/or cancellation of the project altogether. In the end, the losers are the kids and the families of Palmer Township and the district taxpayers. With that, I'll leave it open to the board. Any board member for additional comment?
Thank you, Mr. Chando. I do have just one brief comment to add to that. It is truly hard to understand why the Easton Area School District, a public entity, has had so much difficulty in working with Palmer Township, another public entity, in moving this project forward. And I would just like to call on the members of the Palmer Township Board of Supervisors individually to do everything they personally can to take an active role in resolving this situation, to allow the Easton Area School District to build an amenity that is desired by the people in your township, to have a neighborhood school located in your township, something that people are asking for and that the school district would like to provide. So again, I would just like to ask them to do everything they can as a board to work with us to move this project forward so that we do not have to look at any of the less desirable options that are currently on the table. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Seaga. Is there any other board member with any comments? Okay. Thank you, Superintendent, for indulging me as the board.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chando. Now we hear anybody from the public who wants to speak on buildings and grounds agenda items. Seeing none, my chair summary is that we will be voting on the phone purchase, which is item A at our next board meeting, correct? That's all I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Keegan. We'll move to personnel and negotiations, and I'll move through these items. First item is job description, Chief Human Resources Officer. This was put together by the administration. I believe it was reviewed by legal counsel, if I'm correct.
Yep.
This is part of Mr. Preparati's plans are moving forward here with the administrative position of the district in terms of human resources. This is the board's opportunity to, officially take a look at this. As a board, under policy, we're not obliged to vote on this, but the policy dictates that it be brought. So what I would ask is, if anyone has any items that need clarification, they feel need clarification, please reach out to Mr. Preparati, so that within a short period of time, because I know that he would like to move forward with this. Okay?
Are we discussing the? Okay.
Sure.
So did I miss? I didn't want to interrupt anyone. No. Okay, so all I'm going to say is that I am requesting that in the qualifications that the person currently have the SHRM or some type of certification and have a little bit more of background in HR. And the other question I have to go with that is, it's working with payroll, and so I'm just curious as far as having the payroll person being with the HR department.
We'll talk about how currently you work with payroll in terms of staffing. I'm assuming that's
I work right now in my capacity as human resources. I work closely with our payroll officer, but not in a supervisory capacity, more or less just in working with the things that we need to work out with, days without pay, workman's comp, those kinds of things, so that we're on the same page. But that has, to my knowledge, is more of a business office function, but not, it's something that I work with, but it's, I think, a function of the business office.
Yeah, I was just stating my opinion on, to me, it sounds like something that maybe, I understand the business aspect of it, but it's something that, it's involves staffing, it involves all of those things, so I was just asking the question if that would be something that would make more sense.
Thank you. And just a reminder to the board, as we've discussed specifically at the retreat, we are proposing to elevate this position above the director level and have this individual report directly to the superintendent. And so, that was a good discussion that we had at the retreat. I know not everybody was there, so as was stated earlier, if you have any questions specifically about that or about those thoughts, about that discussion, I'd be more than willing to chat with you. And to get to Mrs. Hess's concern, I think all of us discussed that day also that.
Any other comments at this point? Okay, as I stated previously, now's an opportunity for everyone to take a look at this. And if there's any other clarifications or input that you want to provide, please do so with Mr. Preparati as quickly as possible so we can move forward on this. With that, I'll move to the summer employee rate and the presentation on that, please.
Sure, and this is more or less a discussion item.
Sure.
But we were looking at, this is typically the time of year where we post for our summer workers. In the past, we've had approximately 25 or so that work with maintenance and 5 or so that work with technology. These are students who work with us pretty much from May, if they're college students, May to August, if they're high school students, June to August. And just in looking at the rate, we currently pay $8 an hour. We've not changed that rate since the 2014-15 year. Or I should say it was $7.25 in 2014-15. We raised it to $8 in 15-16. From a recruitment standpoint, and looking at other opportunities that high school and college students have, we wanted to just kind of put it out on the table as a recommendation to discuss increasing that rate, whether it be to $8.75 or to $9. We think that $9 is a more palatable number. Looking, like I said, and looking at other local opportunities that kids have, many of them are in that $9 to $10 range. So we just wanted to put that out for discussion prior to putting the posting up, to see if we could help ourselves from a recruitment standpoint and bringing in students who come in and do some pretty heavy lifting, no pun intended, but over the summer for our crews.
What age are you looking at, 16 and above?
Yes. Yeah.
So the Pennsylvania minimum wage is $7.25, and if Pennsylvania Governor Wolf gets his way and the minimum wage goes up, then we would increase that beyond that.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Bill. No, go ahead, Bill.
Do we experience any shortage of applicants for this type of program?
We have students that sometimes come back and work with us, and then we post for the rest of them. And so just from a recruitment standpoint, I think that there are times struggles to fill that crew. We also know we have an aging crew, aging by seniors in college. But as we lose those students, we will have to replenish them with a probably a larger number than we're used to hiring in the past. So just felt like the timing was to look at this, since we haven't changed the rate in 5 years, and consider an increase in the rate.
I would be in favor of moving to the $9 rate for this year.
Yeah, I had a couple of questions for Mrs. Amelia, and she presented the information so that everybody could hear it as to just what the historical data is. Because every time you talk about raising something, people are going to ask, all right, where were you coming from, where are you going, et cetera, et cetera. So I think, she certainly presented all that information for everybody. Okay, thank you, Mrs. Amelia. The board negotiations team, which is Mr. Whitman, Ms. Sayago, Mr. Guth, and myself, along with district administration, have a negotiation session scheduled for February 12th at 6:30 with our custodial maintenance group to begin discussions on their new contract. The only other group that we need to commence with negotiations would be with our Act 93 employees, and we're working towards securing a date for that. And when we do that, will certainly be public knowledge for everyone. So the two remaining units that the negotiation committee and the administration will be working towards to finalize those contracts. Next item is superintendent goals. If you look at the attachment, I will say that these goals came out of the board. Okay, there was conversation. Board members were even prior to the items, well over 12, I think, somewhere around there. We tried to, the superintendent and I tried to fit them into 3 areas. Okay, so that it's manageable and it can be accomplished. Okay, now obviously, since Mr. Pepperada started in November and there's been a transition period, this is going to extend through this 2020 year. Although we utilize the goals and the evidence that he provides to the board to complete his evaluation, it'll be a little different this year in that, we'll be looking for progress as we go forward as a board to evaluate him. And won't be looking towards, full completion, because obviously we're looking at, having it first discussed in January, and we have to complete his evaluation by June 30th. So it'll be a little different than in previous years, but Dave and I have had an opportunity to talk. This has gotten out to the board in advance. We wanted the public to see this, and we will ask for the board then at the next meeting to be able to approve that formally, so that we move forward there. So does anybody have any questions on anything, on that attachment itself? Okay. Thank you. We're at the point of the public to be heard on personnel and negotiation items that are on this agenda. Okay, seeing none, we will be looking for an approval on the summer employee rate at our next meeting, and we'll be looking for approval on the superintendent goals at our next meeting. Okay, that concludes personnel and negotiations. We'll move to hold on. All right, other business. We look at other business, you'll see that the board also put in discussions at the retreat, and the board members were also asked to solicit on the input and discussions at the retreat, and board members were also asked to solicit various suggestions on goals for the Board of Education. We're challenging ourselves in 3 specific areas, and they are certainly related to the superintendent's goals, because this has to be a collaborative effort between the Board of Education as well as the superintendent and his administration to be able to make sure he's able to meet his goals as well as the Board of Education meeting its goals. So it has to be a collaborative effort. And if you do take a look at those 3 goals, you'll see that certainly that as part of an agenda item to formally recognize those board goals at our next meeting. Okay. With that, we'll move to public to be heard on non-agenda items. Anyone in the public would like to be heard on would like to address the board on a non-agenda item, please come forward to the podium, state your name, sign in. You have 5 minutes.
Come on, Ted.
I just want to thank everyone. If they raise the student helper rate to $9 an hour, it will definitely cut down on our Pizza Fridays to motivate these kids.
Oh, I don't know if you can take food away from them. I don't know.
That's right.
Okay. Seeing none, I'll move adjourn.